In this episode of Escaping the Rabbit Hole, you'll discover the conspiracy theory that my guest almost got caught up in and why he tried to spread around Trump rallies.
Welcome to Escaping the Rabbit Hole, hosted by former conspiracy theorist Antonio Perez, author of Converting Conspiracy Theorists. Antonio looks at conspiracy theories from multiple angles, such as how do conspiracy theorists impact their family and friends? How can they escape the grip of conspiracy theories? And why do they fall down the rabbit hole in the first place? You'll discover strategies to set clear boundaries with people stuck in dangerous conspiracy theories and improve your mental well-being. Here's your host, Antonio Perez.
Aloha, this is Antonio with escapingtherabbithole.com. Today I have a very special guest. This is my friend James Hazelrig. I know him from the hypnosis community. I have not talked to him in about 2 years. It's good catching up. How you doing, James?
I'm doing great. How have you been?
Been inundated by a bunch of QAnon buffoonery.
What?
Beginning of the pandemic, I had used core transformation, from NLP/hypnosis to cut out Facebook. I cut it out for about a month or two. Then I got an email from email from the Andreas family, from Mark Andreas, saying that they were starting a online practice group, and if I want to join the practice group, I could go to the Facebook group, find a practice partner. So part of me was like, I don't know if I should do that. I'm like, okay. I knew crazy stuff was happening on Facebook. I'd been away from like 2 months, from like March and April. I forget what it was. It was like I was out for like 2 months at the beginning of the pandemic. So I'm like, I know there's crazy stuff happening. I'm like, let me just check it. As soon as I opened Facebook, just wham, freaking got hit with all this QAnon buffoonery, and anxiety was through the roof. And I'm like, oh my God, like this was not the smartest thing I've ever done. We actually mentioned in my book, here's my shameless plug.
Congratulations.
Thank you. When I God, if only if I knew somebody that knew how to edit books, I should have contacted you. In the book, I mentioned how one of the dumbest things I've done was going back to Facebook during a global pandemic. God, conspiracy theories were everywhere, are still everywhere. So can you describe what your specialty is within hypnosis, and can maybe explain how your unique ability in hypnosis ties into all the stories that we tell ourselves?
Sure. So yeah, I'm known within the hypnosis community as a hypnotic storyteller. And because the way that I look at it, hypnosis is about changing things about yourself, especially at the identity level. And identity is a story you tell yourself about yourself. It's built up from things that your parents told you as a child that you took on, or that you rejected and told yourself the totally opposite story because you didn't like the one they gave you. So in my practice, I essentially consider that people come to me with a bad story and I help them get a better story. So I do sometimes train other hypnotists in how to use storytelling as part of that change work.
James, what's your website? Are you still selling your hypnotic storytelling?
Sure. So yeah, I have a hypnoticstorytelling.com. I have a couple of courses up there. Yeah.
And one of them, I'm gonna have to plug my ears so you can start telling the story about the elephants. If you get a chance, listen to a story about elephants.
So that's on YouTube. Trunk to Tail, the elephant stories.
I'll put the video below this if you're on my website. I remember it might have been the first conference I met you at, Hypno Thoughts in Vegas, and you were telling this story, and it uses nested loops. Can you describe what a nested loop is within stories?
Sure. So a nested loop is a story within a story, very simply. And when you do a story within a story, you tie up some of your listeners' bandwidth, which translates to their ability to kind of break down and reject things that you're saying. So if you loop a bunch of stories within stories, then their mind kind of gets confused and becomes a little bit more suggestible. So that's one reason why hypnotists use nested loops. It's not a requirement by any means. Stories are hypnotic, but it's a fun thing to do. And I was showing off by looping way too many stories
How many
together.
stories deep was that? Like 20?
No, it's like, I think it's 11, something like that.
That's a lot of stories. And you had to I'm sure you had practice that.
Yeah, I practiced it, and I had a chart. I never quite got around to memorizing the chart that I could do it without glancing at the chart. That was one of my goals, but then I got distracted from it. And, it's not a big deal to look down occasionally.
Yeah, definitely. If you get a chance, I'm almost getting a little trancy. It's funny. I was thinking about that class, and if I just hearing that story, I started kind of nodding off to La La Land. That's one of his little toys with me. If I'll talk to him, he starts changing his voice, starts talking about the elephants. I'm like, oh boy, I'm gonna zone out.
I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, the way that it should be really easy to follow the train of the conversation, the way that an elephant knows his way through the jungle. And
I need to keep you focused with this talk. But yeah, I'm gonna have that video below this.
Subscribe to the podcast by going to www.escapingtherabbithole.com. Add your first name and best email to the form and smash the button that says Get the Podcast. You'll get instant access when the newest episodes are released. Plus, you'll get the first 3 chapters of Antonio's newest book sent directly to your email.
So I have a question. We talked about this briefly. I know you read the description of my podcast and you said that you didn't identify with yourself as a conspiracy theorist, but then you had a little shift. Can you just explain that?
Yeah, so yeah, like you said, I looked at that and I'm like, well, he interviews former conspiracy theorists. Well, I was never a conspiracy theorist. And then I thought, wait a minute. In my youth, I rebelled against my secular humanist parents by becoming a fundamentalist Christian. And I realized
it's usually the other way around.
Yeah, it sure is. Well, there are not nearly as many secular humanist parents right out there. So I rebelled by not going on drugs and by not doing all the crazy, scary things people usually do. So in a way, it wasn't the worst of things. But what I felt like when I stepped into religious fundamentalism was that my eyes had been open. I was awakened to a hidden layer of reality that I had not known existed. That reality was a war between the forces of good and the forces of evil, and I was a soldier behind enemy lines for the forces of good. And everything that I could see around me, I could recognize as some sort of plot by Satan to draw me off into a sinful existence. And sure, there were a lot of people who thought I was completely ridiculous and silly, but that just reinforced my identity as a fundamentalist Christian. And this meant that when most kids are going, oh wow, I really want to kiss girls, I'm like, no. I did want to kiss girls. I wanted to kiss girls a lot, but no, that's sinful. I shouldn't do that until after marriage, right? Now, fortunately, my parents essentially at one point just said, no, you're not going back to that church, and they did their best to kind of deprogram me from that. And it was a very painful, difficult experience for all of us. But I did essentially recognize that there were things at the basis of the fundamentalist Christian belief that I didn't agree with and that I didn't like. And so I was able to kind of break free from it. But I understand that appeal, that feeling that well, everybody else is just wrong. They've all had the wool pulled over their eyes, but I've seen the real thing, and this is an existential battle between good and evil, between supernatural forces in some cases that are behind the scenes.
Can I add something?
Sure.
let me see if this lines up with you. So in my another shameless plug, go to Amazon, grab my book, Converting Conspiracy Theorists. In chapter 2, I something I call the FAME model, FAME. First part, this explains, at least for me, F stands for feeling powerless and wanting to be seen as a hero. A lot of conspiracy theorists, I don't know if this applied to you in the fundamental Christian religion that you got caught up in. A lot of people, I think, see themselves as a victim, but they want to be the hero at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
It's the evil forces. A is apophenia. That's just like, connecting the dots. M is misinformation. And I think the biggest one is E, external locus of control. It's the evil forces. It's us versus them. It's the evil people out there that are trying to, it's the devil. They're trying to ruin our life. It's sick.
Well, and I was fascinated by conspiracy theories as well. I remember I read the Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Anton Wilson, and he's still one of my favorite writers.
My shelf somewhere, but I haven't read it, but I've heard that it was almost like a satire about conspiracy.
Well, yeah, it is, and it's hard to even describe it. Some people have called it the literary equivalent of dropping acid, and it messes with you. It really does. But it's a great set of books, and the thing is that all makes for really good stories, because stories aren't just random events. Stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They have a point. They have a conflict. And trying to break free from that, while you can briefly break out of that in storytelling, and it's fresh and new and exciting, it very quickly drives people nuts, which was the problem with Game of Thrones, right? He sets up these really interesting characters and then nothing comes of them. They all die, right? And you're like, right? Because we don't want our stories to go like that. At first we're like, oh, wow, that was bold. Wow, that was brave. And then, a couple seasons in, your life is pointless. Why am I watching this? It's totally depressing to me. And they had to stop doing that. They had to, So the thing is that when you're telling a story, you have to edit reality to make things interesting. And there are a few things as exciting as the idea of a conflict between good and evil and a big war. I mean, it's the Matrix, right? Is the same kind of thing. And of course, it's really interesting to me that, the Matrix was made by a couple of trans people.
Yes. I love the metaphor, right? Of the red pill.
Yeah, and yet somehow the total opposite side has glommed on to, but the thing is that logic doesn't have to come in.
Yeah.
To this, there is a weird, messed up logic, but there's not a strict sound logic that works out.
Did you were you aware? Were you aware that the with the red pill metaphor, the Wachowski sisters talk about the red pill is alluding to trans hormone. Did you hear about that?
No, I hadn't heard about that, but wow, that's an interesting thing. I knew that.
It's funny how these incel right wing type talk about red pilled. I'm like, they're talking. I'm pretty sure Wachowski sisters
right
talking about it being trans pills. That's hilarious.
That's just kind of nuts. But the thing is that life is more interesting if you can tell yourself those stories instead of recognizing that, shit happens. And what really made me understand something fundamental about the world was when I got my first actual sort of job. I tried all through high school to get, summer jobs. I applied at McDonald's. And nothing would really pan out. I'd, end up doing odd jobs, mowing lawns and stuff like that, but it didn't really work anywhere until finally in college, I got a job at Wendy's. And up till that point, I had had this impression that the world, or at least the adult world, worked in some kind of organized, planned way. I know. Now it seems ridiculous, but I was 19 years old, right? And so I got this job, and I realized that it doesn't work in an organized, planned way. It just stumbles along from day to day. And if something is done in a particular way today, it's because some idiot did it that way yesterday, and we're just reproducing the thing that the last idiot did. And I came to understand.
You're describing AI, I think. How is it?
Well, in a way, yes, that's true. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah.
AI, not to detract from that point, but I think they're talking about how AI now, like, it's starting to it's starting to train itself on stuff it's created.
Well, yeah, and I mean that's the thing, is that AI produces believable but not reliable information. Yeah. I actually asked AI about myself, and it spit out what would have looked like a real good bio for my website. Only it kept mentioning, and I kept saying, no, that's not right. That's not right. It kept saying that I was a member of various hypnosis organizations that I'm not a member of.
Wait, you're not a cat, right?
No. Well, I might be. I could be a cat.
You know what I'm alluding to. You know what I'm alluding to.
Yeah. Yes. Definitely.
Well, yeah. For people that are watching, this is going to be out of context. There was a hypnosis organization that somebody wanted to prove how paper certifications are BS. They basically got their kitty cat certified. Meow.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But I actually did an ad for one of my trainings that was about a cat that wanted to get hypnosis training, and took him through all of his adventures, and anyway.
Was that alluding to the one organization?
Well, no, I mean, no, it was a serious ad, because when I cared about trying to market myself, which I don't care about marketing myself all that much anymore, honestly, but when I did, I realized the internet is a great way to market yourself, and people love cat videos. So I have a cat video out there about a cat who wants to quit smoking. And it's the cutest quit smoking ad ever made. It's simply adorable with all of this funny stuff with the cats. And so I did a similar one, for a hypnosis training I did, with this cat looking off into the distance, and he said he asked himself, what am I doing with my lives? Yeah, anyway, so
we got pulled away. What were we talking about?
Because again, I was using a story. Yeah, what were we talking about? Gosh, so the it's exciting to tell yourself these stories about being in a struggle, and unfortunately, that is more exciting than reality. And that's why we tell stories. Stories are more exciting than reality because they are edited reality. But if you start believing your stories too much, they can end up being detrimental, or they can end up being beneficial. But stories end up shaping reality. They end up shaping perception. They end up shaping policy. Yeah. So, everybody agrees child trafficking and child molestation are terrible things. Everybody agrees on that. There is, I mean, even people who are doing it would say this is a terrible thing, right? Well, okay, maybe the traffickers don't, but I'm pretty sure that actual people who are engaging in child molestation hate themselves for it.
Good human. You could be a shitty person. You still agree. Right.
But you still agree it's terrible. The thing is that because we have portrayals like this recent movie, where it's all daring do and adventure, and I haven't seen it. I recently read a review of it, I don't want to give them my money, though it turns out that there are a bunch of churches buying up tickets to let people see it for free, which proves how actually successful it. Anyway, apparently it starts with a montage of children being snatched off the street. And the thing is, and they didn't start this trope. This trope has been with us through cop shows and all kinds of things for ages. The child molester
blaming Jews for thousands of years for
well, yes,
kids, yeah,
right. We even even not touching on the whole blood libel thing, which but just that there's some sort of scary other, the creepy guy who drives the white van, and says, "Hey kid, want some candy?" Right? But the overwhelming majority of child molestation and child trafficking cases are not that. In most cases, the child knows the abuser. In most cases, the children, and they're legally children, but let's face it, they're not prepubescent. They're 16 and 17-year-olds who are being trafficked by people that they know and probably refer to as their boyfriend or girlfriend. So they don't realize they're being trafficked a lot of times. And why would they? Their story is about children who get snatched by someone in a white van. Yeah. So they don't even know to report, because that's not the story they've been told. And so then you get to government policy. What does the government need to look out for? You get into policing policy. I'm old enough to remember the satanic panic of the 80s. And again, because of stories that were told, and unfortunately there was a hypnotist responsible for a lot of it, Lawrence Pastor, who was, now he wasn't one of our hypnotists, he's one of those darn PhD psychologist hypnotists, right? Who started using regression to find out what was wrong with this attractive young woman who was his patient, who ended up becoming his wife. That's weird. And she remembered all of these things.
Ethics issues there.
Well, yeah, serious ethics issues. But under hypnosis, she remembered all of this terrible satanic ritual abuse that her entire little town up in Canada, over on the western edge of Canada, that the whole town was just full of Satanists, right? The whole frickin' town.
I mean, they're Canadian, so
yeah, no. Well, I've met Canadians. They're nice people. They're not. They're not doing it.
They're not Satanists by and large.
Right. But the thing is, she told him these stories. He wrote down these stories and believed her and published it all in a book, Michelle Remembers. And people went, he's got a PhD. This must be real, right? And so that story got spread. And so while you had Catholic priests abusing the altar boys that they knew, right? While you had, people actually, committing these terrible crimes, the police were focused on satanic ritual abuse, and people went around making their careers out of giving talks to the police, because you know what is more exciting for a police officer than just going through your daily grind of dealing with Joe who gets drunk too much? Believing that you are a soldier for God in a battle against evil, right? So these kinds of stories end up motivating people and affecting public policy. So we need to be very, very careful about the stories that we tell, because stories are compelling in a way that statistics are not. I can say 85% of the people who are trafficked are 16 and 17-year-olds who were forced out of their family because they're gender non-conforming.
A question:
that's a statistic.
I always like to, since I've escaped from conspiracy theories, what's your source for that? Please do not tell me do your own research.
Oh God, go Google it. Okay, well actually, so I read that, and full disclosure, I might be misquoting the statistic. I did not write it down. It was in an article which I read today, which was in Rolling Stone magazine.
Okay.
But if you and it's an article about Sound of Freedom. So if you were to look up that article, you no doubt could follow that footnote to find out where they got that statistic.
Wow, thank you for bringing a source to the.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Do your source research.
Oh my God. Well, and what? Yeah. Anyway, it's not really suitable for the podcast, but when we're done, I'll have to tell you a cite your source story that was interesting recently.
Okay. After the podcast.
Right, but the thing is that it's the culture war, right, is a matter of battles for story. It's figuring out who's going to control the narrative and creating this narrative where, it's really easy to imagine that there are these scary Colombian gangs, right? Those darn brown people, Antonio Perez, who are, you're one of the good ones. You're American. You're not like those guys.
No, I'm
right?
not like those guys. I'm one of the good guys.
Yeah. And so it's really easy to get people riled up to hate the other and to not look at things like, in the cases where it's not gender conforming teens essentially being driven out of their home by their parents' bigotry, it's cases of poverty. There are people in countries, possibly even the US, who are so poor that they will sell their children. And so if we want to really combat this problem, we need to combat poverty, right? But combating poverty isn't exciting because you can't shoot poverty, right? You can't hide somebody from poverty for a few hours and then let them free from poverty.
You know, right? What you do is you get Julia Roberts on it because she always in all those movies. You get Julia Roberts,
right? You get Julia Roberts, and she'll solve the problem, right? And yes, and there are heroic things. There are great, bold, brave people, and there are people doing really important work. But so much of it is not exciting, and I almost feel like I'm betraying my own profession as a storyteller because I like to tell exciting stories, and I cast my client struggles as a battle or as them coming into their own as a superhero, because that's a more exciting story than, wow, I got over my anxiety, but stories are a force, and a force can be used for good or for bad. It has a dark side and a light side, like duct tape. So we have to, when we're examining a story, say, hey, wait a minute. Who's telling this story? Who does this story benefit?
I have a question.
Why would somebody want me to believe this story? And those are questions that conspiracy theorists already ask.
Is your mental and emotional health being affected by a loved one trapped in conspiracy theories? If so, discover how Antonio can help you set clear boundaries and reclaim your mental well-being. Book your free 20-minute consultation call by going to www.escapingtherabbithole.com/call. That's escapingtherabbithole.com/CALL.
Let's say somebody is listening to this that is a conspiracy theorist, and they and maybe they're having doubts about things. What's a good way that they can reframe, or other questions that they can ask themselves to kind of pull themselves out of it?
So I would say, okay, what is the more likely scenario? Not the more exciting scenario, not the more appealing scenario, but the more likely scenario. Because my opinion, and I didn't come up with this, I read this somewhere, but it made sense to me and seemed likely. Conspiracy theorists are people who would prefer that the world is run or misrun by evil rather than incompetence.
Stupidity.
And I have realized that you cannot underestimate the power of human stupidity, and that in most cases, yeah, it's possible that somebody does have it out for me, but it's more likely that they're just incompetent, you know. Um, and sure, some crappy things are done by design, but do I really believe that there is a massive conspiracy out there to make things crappy, or do I think that people are just incompetent? And I think people are incompetent. Um, I think that there are some who try really hard to do some good things and can't manage to get them done. There are some people who try hard to do good things and do get them done, and those are inspiring stories, but they rarely get it done through adventure, through daring do, look, I was a kid, I played D&D, I still play D&D, and I love the idea of being a hero who can smite the bad guys and not question whether or not they're good guys or bad guys,
Funny story about Dungeons and Dragons. I might have told you this. I played one game. I was in 7th grade, and ever since I was like 5 or 6, I was interested in hypnosis. My grandma had, I think, Dave Ellman's book, so I was enthralled by it. So I got invited to play Dungeons and Dragons. I'd always heard about it, and I'm like, so how do I do it? Like, you make your character. I'm like, oh, well, like, what can I be? They're like, anything. I'm like, anything? They're like, anything. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm a hypnotist. And they're like, what do you do? I'm like, I make you do stuff. I was pissing people off. Like, every dice roll, I was like, I make you. Oh, I was pissing people off. I was like, I make you walk, like, put your head in the toilet. So just really annoying stuff. So I basically got kicked out.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how we gravitate towards certain things. And of course, once you become a hypnotist, you find out it doesn't really work like the stories say.
Yeah.
And it is both more wonderful and less exciting. It really is cool when I realize, wow, I was able to help this person get to a better place in their life or overcome this really big problem. But I also can't just, wave my hands and have all the bank tellers give me all the money and forget about it.
It's exciting for the client, I think, because a lot of the skills that we use for things like shifting, like an emotion, using different visualization techniques to like just to bring confidence up, that's common for us. We're like, yeah, cool.
Right. That's
like
true.
It's a party trick for us. But when somebody that's never had an experience of being able to shift out of anxiety rapidly, it's mind blowing.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and that's a thing that we need to remember. And I do try to frame it as something exciting for my clients. Like I said, almost every client I get has some form of anxiety, and I always tell them, with anxiety, you can affect your body's autonomic functions with your thoughts. That's pretty amazing. You think a worrying thought, your heart speeds up. You change your brain chemistry by thinking these negative thoughts all the time. That's a superpower. But like all superheroes, you have misused your superpowers, and you need to go to an old man with a gray beard to teach you how to use your powers properly. Are you ready, Padawan? Right? And I've had clients who go, ooh, right? And that's a reframe. It's telling a person a new and different story. The thing is that with conspiracy theories, almost nobody.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
These are not the droids you're looking for, right? Yeah. I love going into the AT&T store and doing that.
I've done that with
I'm such a nerd.
I had a guest that came up asking for a bathroom once, and as they're asking for a bathroom, like, these are not the droids you're looking for, and then they just kind of paused and they laughed, and they forgot they had to go to the bathroom. We started talking about whatever.
Okay, that's one of my rules. Actually, is if somebody asks where the bathroom is, I don't mess with them. I send them directly to the bathroom. But that's because of a story my father told me. Anyway, no, what I like to do is go to the AT&T store, stand there staring at a wall of Android phones, and when they come over and ask if they can help me, I say, these are not the droids I'm looking for.
You
Anyway,
I bet they all crack up.
I I bet they've had it happen so many times. I think it's clever because I've never done it, but it's I play the fiddle, and so I've heard so many people have made the jokes about, oh, just fiddling around, and my wife has told me I'm not allowed to make fun of them when they do it. I have to smile,
You're like,
instead of going, oh wow, never heard that one before, but
very funny.
my wife, keeps me from being an asshole almost 70% of the time.
That's good.
But yeah, I know it's important. But the thing is, we're back to um, it's really appealing to tell yourself these awful stories because it's a lot more I imagine that that there is a secret group of powerful people who are harvesting adrenochrome from children, right? And somehow that is more exciting than we actually caught Jeffrey Epstein, right? And how do we not have his client list,
Yeah.
right? And so if you were gonna glom onto conspiracy theories, you'd say, well, there probably is a cover, and there probably is a cover up there. There probably are powerful people who don't want you to know that, but that's not because they're drinking adrenochrome or doing whatever you do with adrenochrome. I have no idea what they do with the adrenochrome. It's because they were shagging little girls, teenage girls who were underage, right? And that's wrong. And so we need to stop being distracted. In fact, if I believe in any conspiracy theory, I believe that conspiracy theories are created to distract us from what's really going wrong in the world. So I'd say if you got a conspiracy theorist, tell them, oh man, you fell for it. You fell for it. The real conspiracy was getting you to believe those conspiracy theories. So get back to the real problem.
You think the moon landing is fake? You believe in the moon?
You believe in the moon? Come on. Yeah, right. Well, clearly the moon can't be a rock because rocks don't glow.
Jesus.
And so yeah, I mean, I respect you for being willing to engage. I pretty much hit a point where like, no, I'm not.
Oh no,
I'm not going to. Because it's the tar baby.
I'd rather engage with family members of conspiracy theorists
Sure.
Conspiracy theorists, because it's just
because and they need help, and it is heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking. I mean, and what's weird too is that I can say, well, okay, that dude, he really swallowed the Kool-Aid, and I'm sure he's saying to himself, that James, he really swallowed the Kool-Aid. Right?
Oh yeah.
So it's weird, and I think people should buy your book and learn, because that it's something we need in this world, because
a lot of crazy people.
Yeah, but recognizing that power that stories have, and realizing that you can give a person a better story.
And it's funny, I actually thought I might want to do a podcast on this in the future. That's if I keep going with this series. I don't know, I'm kind of up in the air about it. I like the idea of how do we create a conspiracy theory? Like, I wonder if we could create a conspiracy theory that would help to create like a vacuum effect that would break down how can we create a conspiracy theory that could help somebody to doubt themselves? Like, one, I thought when all the anti-vax nonsense was coming about, I'm like, how about we just create a conspiracy theory that you can detox from the harmful ingredients in a vaccine by throwing a crystal and some Epsom salts in a hot bath, just soaking it, shoving the crystal up your ass, and you'll detox from.
Right. Yeah. And a
lot of people would believe that.
A lot of people would. Well, and when and that's a much more benign than something I had in mind back when I was wearing a mask, anytime I was out in public. and I was really waiting for somebody to come hassle me about wearing a mask, right? And I even imagined, I played through this scenario in my mind in which I was a brilliant hero, but because that's how you prepare to take action, is you play it through in your mind and you tell yourself the story of how you want it to go. So it's almost like hypnosis. So the story, and it never happened. It never happened, unfortunately. But I imagined myself, I'm standing there at the gas pump, and somebody comes up to me and says, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're such a sheeple. You're wearing that mask." And I was ready to look at them and say, "Don't you know that Obama made sure that there were security cameras everywhere? And if you Google it, you'll find out that security cameras have facial recognition software that doesn't work on black people. It only works on white people. That is a conspiracy against us. You idiot. I can't believe you're giving them your face. The only way to protect yourself is wear this mask." Right? And the funny thing is, like so many conspiracy theories, that has an inkling of truth. The first facial recognition software that white engineers came up with, they tested on themselves, and it was not good at recognizing black faces. And that wasn't because of some conspiracy to and I'm like, how on earth could that have even harmed? But they're like, oh, a lot of black people find that even the software doesn't acknowledge them as humans. And I'm like, well,
was it because of white people programming it?
It was white people programming it and testing it on themselves. In other words, it was not evil, it was incompetence.
Yep.
And so, but that inkling of truth is there. And the scene ends with me saying, "Google it," and then just saying, "Bah, bah, bah," at them until they run away.
Bah, bah, bah.
But it never happened. It never happened. Perhaps because I had heard all the stories about people who are harassing mask wearers.
Yeah.
And those stories were probably vastly exaggerated.
During the pandemic, I could have made a good amount of money. I was trying to find a print on demand mask maker. I wanted to make one say like uncensored, unvaxxed, freedom.
Right. Yeah.
Because honestly, they have been a good way to get those people to mask up and make money.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And well, yeah. And I mean, I did try very early on to start a rumor that going to Trump rallies was the best way to avoid getting COVID, in hopes of encouraging all those people to go and spread. But it didn't matter. My rumor never took off, but they still flocked to Trump rallies and people died.
Yeah.
So that's the tough thing, is it's like, I mean, you can get them to doubt, but the brain is really good at rationalizing. We're not rational creatures. We are rationalizing creatures. And the brain is really good at rationalizing around things. So there's a documentary, I assume it's still on Netflix, I don't know, excuse me, about flat earthers. And there is a brilliant, fascinating scene where they're talking to this one flat earther who's talking about all of the rumors and conspiracy theories about her that are floating around in the flat earth community. And she says, these are ridiculous. I mean, how can anybody believe these things? And she for a brief moment goes, hey, if they're spreading all of that nonsense about me that I know isn't true, what if all the other stuff that I've been believing isn't true? No, I know the earth is flat, right? She had this, she was almost there, right? But that's what our brains do. We are very good at rationalizing, and it takes training to keep yourself from doing it. And even people like me who think that we've gotten really good at it, we're still rationalizers.
Yeah.
We still do it. I think one of the other things is that actual science is a method for approaching the truth. But there are no absolute truths in science. And so science is a matter of coming up with the best hypothesis possible and testing it. And if a hypothesis can't be disproven by something, then if it can't theoretically be disproven, then it's not a good hypothesis. It has to be testable, right? So if you say God exists, well, there's no way to disprove that or to prove it, right? So that's not a good hypothesis. I happen to have my own beliefs about the divine, but I don't claim that I can prove them. So science doesn't have that comforting certainty.
Yep.
So early on, they were not encouraging people to put on masks because they were worried that there was going to be a giant shortage of masks and that the people who needed them the most, medical professionals, wouldn't be able to get them. Then they realized, okay, we do have enough. Let's go ahead and encourage people to put on masks. And the evidence was really obvious. There were places where it's like, oh, wow, lots of people are masking up. Oh, look, they're not spreading this disease. They said it's probably not a good idea for everybody to crowd together in big groups. Now, over time, they came to understand that actually being outdoors in big groups was nowhere near as big a risk as being in a climate-controlled space. So, for instance, the Texas Renaissance Festival opened up, and I skipped that year, honestly. I was like, nope, I ain't going. I am not taking that risk. And they said they had rules about wearing masks, but they didn't enforce them. So there were massive numbers of people all gathered together. And actually, there wasn't a giant spike in COVID. There was a giant spike in violence in the campground. And people complaining about that online said, wow, it's weird. I'm like, oh, if only there were, I don't know, some way to some litmus test to find out if somebody cares about the well-being of others. And then they could maybe wear something that indicates that they care about the well-being of others. And then if they don't wear that, you don't let them in.
Yeah.
And people were like, oh, wow, that sounds like a great idea. And then I'm like, there is, it's called a mask, you moron, you know, and they're like, oh, blah, 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 you know, get all pissed off. But in hindsight, we looked at it and went, okay, it wasn't as big a risk for people to be gathered outdoors as it was for them to be gathered indoors, especially in climate controlled spaces. Now, the most dangerous situations, the big super spreader events, were choir practices in churches because people are breathing out, right? And it's all going into that system and getting spread all right back into the air. Everybody's breathing. And yet we couldn't stop those because of religious freedom. You can't stop me going to church. Now, I knew a lot of churches that went online.
Hey,
and you know what?
If you want to see God, go to church.
Yeah, well, and here's the irony. God can still hear your prayer when you're at home alone. In fact, I'd swear that I want to say Matthew chapter 6, verses 5 and 6 say, be not as the hypocrite who stands on the street corner and preaches, but instead go in private into your closet and seek God alone.
Isn't that similar? It says, let your right hand not knoweth what your left hand does, or something like that.
I don't know. I'm not sure, but you know, I as a kid, I always wanted to make sure God didn't know what either of my hands were doing. But
yeah,
I know. I went there. Oh my God, I can't believe I went there.
I was gonna go there. I'm like, no, I won't. But you went there, so
I went there, so you're absolved from that. But the thing is, they were shutting down bars, right? Which actually weren't as big a risk as choir practices, because at least people aren't singing as loudly in bars. There's usually one guy up there, and he's away from others with a microphone singing, right? And on one hand, I was like, you know, well, a friend of mine got all up in arms because he plays bars all the time, and he was like, all these bars are getting shut down. I don't have a way to make a living. And I'm like, I understand your anger, but at the same time, we shouldn't be gathering in bars, theaters, or churches. But the churches were protected, not from COVID, but they were protected by the First Amendment. And so, these people who should have cared the most about others were gathering together, spreading the disease.
Wait, were they spreading gospel or were they spreading the disease?
Well, which is which? I'm gonna get all sorts of angry people now. It's okay. I managed to get into arguments with Christians and atheists.
His name is James Hazelrick. His address is.
Yeah, I know. Seriously. But that's the thing, though, is that conspiracy theories, like religions, give you a framework and they give you a sense of certainty. And certainty is comforting. There is no doubt that certainty is far more comforting than living in a state of doubt.
Yeah.
Which is what science has to be based on. I don't know if we're ever really going to win that battle.
Speaking of certainty,
we're always going to seek certainty.
And speaking of certainty, I realized I wanted to keep this a half an hour, but I haven't caught up. Speaking of certainty, we need to wrap up. It's been a long time.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. If somebody wants to learn about hypnotic storytelling, you have hypnoticstorytelling.com.
That's right.
In this,
I haven't done any podcast in quite a long time. I have like about 2 seasons of one called the Hypnotic Stories podcast, which you can still find. It is available, and includes some pretty decent examples of me and other people telling the stories. So if you're into storytelling, I hope you'll check that out and enjoy it.
Thank you for coming on the podcast, and I look forward to catching up with you soon.
Yeah, definitely. Take care.
Thanks for listening to Escaping the Rabbit Hole. To get instant access to the newest episodes of the podcast and the first 3 chapters of Antonio's newest book, go to www.escapingtherabbithole.com and enter your first name and best email and smash the button that says Get the Podcast.